have anybody basically.
In my first video in this Iceberg series, we hit base level terms, personas, and events involved in the world of cannibalism. Well, grab a snack. But you may vomit, so scratch that. Get comfy. It's gonna be a long one, tasty as can be. It's pretty awful to know that cannibalism has existed all throughout history, and it's even worse that despite all we covered in my last video, and check it out if you haven't seen it, we're just getting started. It truly begins to get awful. Prepare yourself. We are gonna go a little deeper. I promised it was gonna be awful, and I'm here to deliver. Albert Fish. There's something a bit fishy going on with that Albert Fish. There is something awfully handsome about a soulless stare as a man is placed in an electric chair. May 19th, 1870. Albert Fish emerges from the fishy womb. At the time of his birth, Albert's father was 75 years old, and his mother was 34 years younger than his father. Albert Fish's whole family was full of mental illness. His mother had hallucinations, his uncle suffered from mania, his brother was confined to a mental institution, and his sister Annie had mental affliction. When Albert's elderly father passed away, his mother placed him in an orphanage because, she could barely take care of herself. Albert was often abused in the orphanage, so much so that he began to enjoy the beating he was receiving. Along with the beating, he would witness countless cases of sexual abuse regarding other boys. Albert's mother got a stable job and ended up removing him from the orphanage. At this point, he was hanging around with different people in the neighborhood, and he began hanging out with a telegraph boy who ended up introducing him to some particular things that involve urine and feces and the art of consuming those things. Yeah, he got into the knack of watching boys at the public bath undress, and he even began writing obscene letters to strange women whose names he plucked from the classified section in the newspaper. Skimming along his life, he becomes a prostitute in his 20s, going along raping young boys. He has 6 kids with his arranged marriage wife. He was into mutilation, of course. One of his friends, because for some reason Albert Fish runs into some other mentally depraved human beings. One of his friends that he runs into ends up taking him to a human anatomy exhibit, and he notices a wax model of a bisected penis. And, of course, Albert is fascinated by this. He plans to begin sexual mutilation on someone else. In 1910, he kidnaps a man named Thomas Keaton. He takes Thomas to an abandoned farmhouse where nobody can hear him. Albert knew that no one would be coming to this house. It was tucked away in such a place and so far out of where everyone was staying that there was no chance that anyone could hear what was happening. He takes Thomas to this house, begins torturing him. The torture lasts for 2 weeks. It ends in Albert cutting the man's penis in half. I shall never forget his scream or the look he gave me. Albert then proceeds to pour peroxide over the wound. He wrapped the man's dong in some wrap, and then he leaves him $10, which I mean that's pretty good. I mean, like, what's that? If you adjust that for inflation, like, what is that? That's like, hold on, give me a second here. Due to inflation, $10 in 1910 to 2022. $10 is equivalent to $292.58. That is the price of half a man's cock. And then, he, being the cheerful gent he is, gave him a kiss goodbye. Because, what else you gonna do? That's pretty gangster right there, though. Gave the man, like, $300 after he snipped his penis and then, like, kissed him. He just left him there. Just left him. Just fucked up. So not only was Albert Fish fascinated with mutilating other people, he enjoyed the pain. He was a bit of a masochist himself. He began putting needles in his groin and abdomen, like several needles, not like acupuncture. Like he wasn't trying to it wasn't like Chinese medicine or anything. He was just shoving shit in his body. And he would also do this cool thing where he would like put lighter fluid on like some wood. He'd shove it in his butt and he'd light it on fire. Okay, what the fuck, dude? Like, what are you doing? Albert Fish had what he called his implements of hell. A meat cleaver, a butcher's knife, and a handsaw. The trifecta. Who doesn't carry? I mean, I don't leave the house without the essentials. He begins using his implements of hell to mutilate, torture, and kill very young boys, often under the age of 6 years old. He even goes and hires teenage boys to go procure these little boys for him. Could you imagine being a teen boy? Some old man offers you $5 to bring him a 5-year-old so he can like do shit to their genitals. Like, what the fuck? Albert Fish's most notable murder was that of Grace Budd. Remember how I mentioned that Albert liked to write obscene letters to women? Well, keep that in mind as I read this. In 1894, a friend of mine shipped as a deckhand on the steamer Tacoma, Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco to Hong Kong, China. On arriving there, he and 2 others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At that time, there was a famine in China. Meat of any kind was from $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 were sold to the butchers to be cut up and sold for food in order to keep the others from starving. A boy or girl under 14 was not safe in the street. You could go in any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out and just what you wanted cut from it. A boy or girl's behind, which is the sweetest part of the body, and sold as veal cutlet, brought the highest price. John stayed there so long he acquired a taste for human flesh. On his return to New York, he stole 2 boys, one 7, one 11, took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them in a closet, then burned everything they had on. Several times every day and night, he spanked them, tortured them to make their meat good and tender. First, he killed the 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest ass and, of course, the most meat on it. Every part of his body was cooked and eaten except the head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven, all of his ass, boiled, broiled, fried, stewed. The little boy was next, went the exact same way. At that time, I was living at 409 East 100th Street, rear right side. He told me so often how good human flesh was, I made up my mind to taste it. On Sunday, June the 3rd, 1928, I called on you at 406 West 15th Street, brought you pot cheese, strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat in my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind then to eat her, on the pretense of taking her to a party. You said yes, she could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs, stripped all my clothes off. I knew if I did not do that, I would get her blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and called her. Then I hid in a closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run downstairs. I grabbed her, and she said she would tell her mama. First, I stripped her naked. Oh, how did she kick, bite, and scratch. I choked her to death, then cut her in small pieces so I could take my meat to my rooms, cook, and eat it. How sweet and tender her little ass was roasted in the oven. It took me a total of 9 days to eat her entire body. I did not her, though I could. I could have, had I wished. She died a virgin. January 16th, 1936. Albert Fish's last words were, "I don't even know why I'm here." Upon his death, his attorney had procured his final statements. They were pages upon pages of notes scribbled hours before his death. When the attorney was asked what it said, he simply replied, "I will never show it to anyone." It was the most filthy string of obscenities that I had ever read. Saturn devouring his son. You ever just look at your son and think, he's better than me, that little shit? I ought to bite your fucking head off. Saturn devouring his son is a painting by Francisco Goya, a mentally ill Spanish artist. This painting depicted the Greek myth of the Titan Kronos. Saturn is the Romanized version of Kronos. He feared that he could possibly be overthrown by one of his offspring. So he did the fatherly thing, and he ate each child upon birth. Because, that's just what you do, Like a bit insecure. It's a little insecure. This painting is one of 14 paintings that was painted directly on the walls of Francisco Goya's house by himself. They were entitled The Black Paintings. For good reason, because this is some dark shit. The Essex whaling ship. Man, was like eating people inevitable on ships? Essex was an American whaler from Nantucket, Massachusetts, which was launched in 1799. In 1820, while at sea in the southern Pacific Ocean under the command of Captain George Pollard Jr., she was attacked and sunk by a sperm whale. Thousands of miles from the coast of South America with little food and water, the 20-man crew was forced to make for land in the ship's surviving whaleboats. The men suffered severe dehydration, starvation, and exposure on the open ocean. We know what's coming. And their survivors eventually resorted to eating the bodies of the crewmen who had died. That's okay. Alright, we've had that before. This next part's fucked up. When that proved insufficient, members of the crew made a lottery to determine who they would sacrifice so that the others could live. Oh man. A total of 7 crew members were cannibalized before the last of the 8 survivors were rescued, more than 3 months after the sinking of the Essex whaling ship. First mate Owen Chase and cabin boy Thomas Nickerson later wrote accounts of the ordeal. The tragedy attracted international attention and inspired Herman Melville to write his famous 1851 novel, Moby Dick. The Miami Zombie. Don't do bath salts, kids. On May 26, 2012, very, very recent, Rudy Eugene attacked and maimed Ronald Popo, a homeless man, on the MacArthur Causeway in Miami, Florida, making headlines worldwide. During the 18-minute filmed encounter, Eugene accused Popo of stealing his Bible, beat him unconscious, removed Popo's pants, and bit off most of Popo's face above the beard, including his entire left eye, leaving him blind in both eyes. As a result of the incident's shocking nature and subsequent worldwide media coverage, Eugene came to be dubbed the Miami Zombie and the Causeway Cannibal. The attack ended when Eugene was fatally shot by a Miami PD officer. Although friends and family filled in details of Eugene's life, the reason for the attack remains unclear. Eugene was 31, employed at a car wash at the time, was divorced with a series of petty criminal arrests from age 16, with the last in 2009. While police sources speculated that the use of the street drug like bath salts might have been a factor, experts expressed doubt since toxicology reports were only able to identify marijuana in Eugene's system, leaving the ultimate cause of his behavior unknown. Popo was 65 years old, a graduate of Manhattan's Stuyvesant High School. He was homeless and had long been presumed dead by his estranged family. So everybody thought he was already dead, and then somebody bites his face off and he's still alive, but I can't see. God, it's tragic. Omaima Ari Nelson. Omaima met her husband William E. Nelson, a 56-year-old pilot, in October of 1991. She was 23 years old at the time. Within days of meeting, the couple married. That's always a bad idea. But Omaima would later claim that during the couple's month-long union, she suffered sexual abuse at the hands of her husband. She claimed that on November 28, 1991, Bill had sexually assaulted her in their California apartment. Following this, Omaima proceeded to stab Bill with the scissors and then began beating him with the clothes iron. Oh, okay. After killing him, oh, he's dead. All right. She began dismembering his body and cooked his head and boiled his hands to remove his fingerprints. That it escalated so quickly. She then mixed up his body parts with the leftover turkey and disposed of him in a garbage disposal. The neighbors claim they heard the disposal unit running for hours. She reportedly castrated him in revenge for his alleged sexual assaults. She told her psychiatrist that she had cooked her husband's ribs in barbecue sauce and eaten them. But then she went back on this statement. I feel like you got to commit to that statement. If you're gonna say that, come on. During the trial, it was revealed that as a child living in Cairo, Egypt, she had undergone female genital mutilation and sex was traumatic and painful for her. Only increased by the assault she allegedly sustained during her marriage, she was convicted of second-degree murder on January 12, 1993. Sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. She first became eligible for parole in 2006, but was denied. They found her unpredictable and a serious threat to public safety. She will not be able to seek parole again until 2026. The Ruhr Hunter. The corpses of 5 young women were found in small villages in West Germany. Each body had been raped, stabbed, and or strangled, as well as mutilated. The cuts were of strange nature. Parts of the victims had been removed. Slices from the buttocks, thighs, and belly were taken. This type of cut was suggestive of a cannibal. The parts were the meatiest parts of the body. The wounds were about steak size. The police questioned people in the area of the murders. One man suggested the name Joachim Kroll. Kroll had told the man not to use the toilet in their apartment building. When the man asked Kroll what it was stopped up with, Kroll replied, "With guts." Police searched Kroll's apartment and found sex gadgets and blow-up dolls. Kroll later admitted that he would often masturbate with one hand while strangling the doll in the other hand. What is that, a flex? They also found plastic bags of flesh, frozen, a hand in a saucepan, and more flesh, including assorted viscera, clogged in the toilet. Kroll confessed to these murders. He even began to brag about them. Kroll began to confess to murders that the police did not even know about. He confessed to the murders of 9 other people, 8 young girls and 1 man. Kroll had been watching the young man and his girlfriend having sex in the Volkswagen. Kroll became so sexually aroused that he had decided to rape the girl. Kroll slashed the front tire of the car. Instead of checking the tire, the young man hit the gas and sped off. After taking wrong turn, the car returned to Kroll. Kroll's confession. helped him earn a sentence of life imprisonment. Joachim Kroll began killing in 1955 after his mother died. Here's a brief list of his victims. February 8th, 1955. Irmgard Schrell, 19, raped and stabbed to death. Her disemboweled body was found in a barn in Ludenhausen. June 16th, 1959. Clara Frieda Tesmer, 24, murdered in the meadows of the Rhine, near Rheinhausen. A mechanic, Heinrich Ott, was arrested for the crime. He hanged himself. July 26th, 1959. Manuela Not, 16, raped and strangled in the city park of Essen. Slices of flesh were carved from her buttocks and thighs. 1962, Barbara Bruder, 12 years old, abducted in Burscheid. Her body was never found. April 23rd, 1962, Petra Gies, 13, raped and strangled in Dingslauken, Bruckhausen. Vinzenz Kuchen is arrested and convicted. June 4th, 1962, Monika Tafel, 12 years old, killed in Walsum. Slices of flesh carved from her buttocks. Walter Quicker is arrested for the crime. He is released, but is driven by neighbors to suicide in October. August 22nd, 1965. Hermann Schmitz and his girlfriend Marion Veen were attacked as they sat in a car in Lover's Lane in Duisburg. Kroll's only male victim was killed, but Marion escaped. Ursula Roldi strangled her boyfriend Adolf, committed suicide after being falsely accused of the crime. Ilona Hark, age 5, raped and drowned in a ditch. Maria Hetgen, rape and strangled. Jutta Rahn, strangled walking home from the train station. Peter Shea was arrested and eventually released. He confessed to the crime in 1976 after being hounded by his neighbors. Karen Topfer, 10, raped and strangled. Marion Ketter, 4 years old. Parts of her body were in the process of being simmered when Kroll was arrested. The police went up to Kroll's apartment and found the body of the Ketter girl cut up. Some parts were in the fridge. A small hand was cooking in the pan of boiling water, and entrails were found stuck in the waste pipe. Kroll confessed to 15 murders. He was charged with 8 and 1 attempted murder. Convicted on all counts, was given 9 life sentences. He died of a heart attack in 1991 in the prison of Rheinbach near Bonn. Peter Bryan. Bryan was born in London on the 4th of October 1969, the youngest of 7 children of immigrant parents from Barbados. He left school age 14 or 15, obtained unemployment at a clothes stall, later moving to teach cooking lessons at his local soup kitchen. In 1987, Peter Bryan lived in the Flying Angle Custom House, East London. Police were called when he attempted to throw another resident from the 6th floor window. The victim reported the initial attack by Bryan was unprovoked. Police took no action against Bryan in the attack. In 1994, Bryan was sent to Rampton Secure Hospital for admitting to the murder of a 21-year-old shop assistant, Nisha Sheth, who was beaten to death with a hammer in 1993. By February 2001, the nursing staff thought he had made considerable progress in regarding to his behavior, attitude, maturity, relationships, anger, and insight. Bryan was transferred from Rampton in June 2001 to John Howard Center after a 6-month trial. He was released into the care of a psychiatrist and a social worker after applying to a mental health review tribunal in 2002. Bryan was moved to the Riverside Hostel in North London, where he was allowed to come and go as he pleased. In October 2003, psychiatrists noted that there had been a continued improvement in his mental state and talked of plans to move for more independent accommodation. In January 2004, social workers applied for the transfer of Bryan to a low-support accommodation instead. Bryan was transferred to an open psychiatric ward at Newman General Hospital for his safety after allegations that he had incidentally assaulted a 16-year-old girl. A month later, Bryan killed friend Brian Cherry on 17th of February 2004, just hours after being discharged from the mental health unit. Reportedly, the victim had been dismembered, and officers found a frying pan on the stove with tissue from the dead man's brain. Bryan was remanded to Broadmoor Hospital after appearing in court over Cherry's death. On the 25th of April, Bryan killed fellow patient Richard Loudwell, age 59, while still in Broadmoor. Brian said if he had not been interrupted, then he would have eaten Loudwell's flesh. Brian was committed to Broadmoor Hospital for treatment with a minimum of 15 years. The SS Dumaro was a Hugh-type wooden steamship launched on April 17th of 1918 in Portland, Oregon, as part of the United States Shipping Board Merchant Fleet Corporation. On October 16th, 1918, during her maiden voyage, Dumaro was struck by lightning off the coast of Guam, lighting the cargo on fire and destroying the ship. All hands were able to evacuate into 2 lifeboats and 1 raft. The 2 lifeboats, one undermanned with only 9 of its 20 seats filled, and the other severely overcrowded with 32 men aboard, drifted for approximately 3 weeks across the Pacific Ocean to the Philippine Islands. The latter boat quickly exhausted its fresh water supply, forcing the crew to construct a crude water distillation device and eventually resorting to cannibalism, consuming the bodies of the other crewmen who had died of exposure. The SS Ernmore set sail from Baltimore on the 29th of August 1889 under the command of Captain Richard J. Gray. She was bound for Rio de Janeiro, carrying 86,000 bushels of wheat and large quantity of miscellaneous cargo valued at around $71,000. On the 4th of September, the ship encountered a severe cyclone, and at 12:30 a.m. on the next day gave a sudden lurch and sank. 1 lifeboat floated free. 11 men from the crew of 24 managed to scramble aboard, lacking any food or water. The survivors suffered from intense thirst and hunger, as for 21 days the boat drifted in the Gulf Stream. They saw 11 ships, one of which a British bark. They were convinced that they had been seen, but this ship had sailed away. There seemed to be no hope.